Hello. I'm going to speak to you today. I left school at 16. Um, Fast forward 16 years later, I'm running a multi-million dollar business. I'm sitting in a boardroom presenting to a group of executives financial results. I'm just going to kind of paint a little bit of a picture, tell you a little bit of a story of how I got there. Um, I guess in the early life, I'm one of five children. Single parent. We had just a mother. Some would say we had a mother and father and one. I'm one of five siblings. That's a picture of one of my older brothers. I have two older brothers and two older sisters. Oh, one older sister, one younger. Um, and we grew up in a home where we weren't particularly wealthy. I would say probably the opposite of that. We were the extreme opposite of wealthy. We weren't a particularly close family. Um, although we didn't want for anything or we didn't go wanting, but we weren't particularly close as siblings. There was quite a close gap between me, my younger sister, and Keith, who's my older brother. There's a couple of years between us, and then there was about an 8 or 9 year gap between my older sister and my older brother. But there was somewhat of I wouldn't say a disconnect, but we weren't particularly close as a family growing up. We spent a lot of time outdoors. We didn't have computers or anything like that. So I spent a lot of time outdoors playing mischief. Um, and I got a real sense from a young age, and I wasn't aware of it now, but I wasn't aware of it back then, but I'm totally aware of it now, that I had a real sense of connection with people when I was out. I thrived on being with people. I was very active, very sportive, always had a ball in my hand, always playing football. So that kind of gave me a real sense of, I guess, connection with people, or connecting with people, and the importance of connection with people. We grew up in Ballymun, Poppin so technically not Ballymun, but um, and my mum still lives there now. It was a 3 bedroom house. Um, and growing up in Ballymun, I guess, was an interesting time growing up in the 90s. I was really, really fortunate growing up in Ballymun. It's had its negative press at times, but it's an unbelievable community, an unbelievable community spirit. I played a lot of sport. I was involved with Ballymun Kickhams. I was involved with Ballymun United. So I kind of made my way. I navigated through the early lives of Ballymun relatively easy. For a couple of reasons. One, I was good at sports, so I was kind of popular. And I had various different groups of friends and different groups of people. So that helped me navigate through the area. Wasn't bullied, went quite unscathed without any mischief. I wasn't, but I very quickly learned to look after myself. Growing up in an area like that, we kind of had to look after yourself. But a couple of things happened when we were quite young. As I said, we had real good connections and had a really good group of friends. We lost one of our closest friends at the age of 12. And looking back at it now, what that gave me now, and what I realised back then, from back then, was that it gave the community and the coming together in Ballymun was incredible. He was 12 years of age. He was scuttling on the back of a generator, went to get off, fell, banged his head. And then there was about a 3 week period where he was in intensive care in the life support machine, and then the life support machine was turned off. And I never seen a funeral like that. A 12-year-old boy who was really connected to the community was taken from us. And that hit us as kids. We were kids at the time. We were really close. I remember doing a guard of honour at the funeral. I remember how upset I was about it. And still to this day, when I talk about it, I'd never seen a funeral like it in terms of the community and to get the togetherness of Ballymun. But what that also taught me was the connection with people was something that I thrived on. The connection with people around me was something that I thrived on. As I said, growing up in Ballymun, I was quite fortunate. I was quite good at football. I was a fairly talented footballer. So that led throughout that to leaving school at 16. I went to Ballymun Comprehensive School, which is now Trinity Comprehensive on the Ballymun Road. At the time when I was coming up to 16 to leave school, I was at the playing and captain in Ireland with under 15 and under 17. So I was kind of if you want to call it a big deal, with a big ego. I was a 16-year-old walking around thinking I had made it all. And then I was afforded an opportunity. I trialled at many clubs in the UK, and I was offered an opportunity to sign with Derby County. Looking back now, I didn't give anybody a say in whether I was signing or not. I was signing, and I made that decision at 16. As I said, I had a mother, with no father figure. My uncle stepped in, but my mind was already made up. I was leaving school. I left school in a fanfare. The Lincoln Assembly Hall, so it wouldn't be as big as this, presented me with a big frame and wished me well, and I was sky high. Fast forward a couple of months, I'm in the airport. There's bus loads of people from Ballymun there. I'm going, waving, it's great. I got on the plane, I'm flown over, I land, and I'm living in a farm. It's a Sunday evening. What? I'm told to be on the training ground, I have to get 2 buses. I've no money. I've no way of knowing where I'm getting to. And my digs lady drops me to the bus stop, gives me a couple of quid, and off I went, and I had to get to the training ground. For the first week, I cried and I cried and I cried. I was completely out of my comfort zone. I was completely in shock. My life was in shock. I didn't want to be there. I wanted to go home. And like all 16-year-olds, what do you do when you want to go home? I rang my ma. And I spoke to her. Within 2 minutes, my uncle, who had stepped in, had rang me back, and the conversation lasted 4 words. Cop, dead, on. And the phone went down. And I was like, okay. So I had a decision to make then. It was sink or swim. You're 16. You wanted all the glory. Now you've got it. You're in the middle of it now. What do you do? So I decided, right, pull up my big boy pants and I'm going to back myself. And throughout the course of the years in the UK, the life lessons I got, I still carry today. I was fortunate enough to play with some players on the left-hand side that would have went on to play in the Premier League. And on the right-hand side, we played with Ireland, would have been full internationals. About 7 or 8 in that picture that went on to be full internationals for Ireland. I'm there, little shaved head, a little bit of mischief in me. But in my mind back then, I was as good as if not better than any of them. I was as good and I deserved my place there, if not better than any of them. I wasn't technically the best player you'd ever see on a football pitch, but I'd grown up in an area that taught me some valuable life lessons. I was edgy, I was aggressive, I played on the edge, I was fearless, and that got me really, that compensated a lot for the lack of ability that I had, but it also drove me. I was captain in Derby in under 17s, under 19s, I captained the reserves. I was captain in Ireland at under 17. That's another 21 international cap, I think I got, where we won a tournament in Madeira. So it was a big deal. But what I gathered from that back then was I was equally as good, but equally important in a team environment. So I learned very good life lessons about the importance of a team, the importance of the position or the role anyone plays in one team, and that I was as vitally important as anybody else. I was living in a bubble. I was cocky, I was arrogant, I had money, everything. Life couldn't have been better. Life couldn't have been any better. I was a professional footballer, I was playing for my country, I was dipping back at the weekends, I was partying with friends, I had it all. Until the 10th of March, I think it was 2004, 2005, my contract was coming to an end. I was called into the office. I was on crutches at the time, I was injured, and I was told, we don't think you're good enough. And I highlight the word we here because that was their opinion. My opinion was I was good enough, and I wasn't going home. But their opinion was, you're not good enough, and you're going home. So I remember going outside, and I picked up the phone to my mum. And God, like my mum was not really, she knew I played football. That's pretty much the extent of it. She'd been over a lot of times, but she didn't know the extent of how I was involved. And I said, look, it's not going to happen. I'm coming home. And she was like, what? Can't come home here. There's no room for you. And I was like, okay. So I remember putting down the phone, and what went through my mind at the time was I'd never ever, something similar to what Helen touched on in a little bit about Ronaldo earlier on, I'd never ever find myself in a situation again where I feel worthless. Like your dream is just popped. You went with this high hope, this absolutely fanfare, and you're coming home with your tail between your legs on a one-way ticket home, thinking, how am I going to do this? So like all 20-year-olds I did, when I came home, I had 3 or 4 months that I drank and partied, until I woke up one morning and my mum was tipping me on the shoulder to say, you're going to get a job or you're going to get out. And I was thinking, well, I'm only being thrown out of one place, and now I'm going to get thrown out of another. So I had a decision to make. So I needed to get a job. I'd no leaving cert. I left after my junior cert. Did some sort of sports science in Loughborough College over there, but it was, I want to say, the equivalent of A levels, but it wasn't. In fact, I missed through it, and I don't even know what result I got at the end. But I ended up getting a job. I ended up getting a job with a big multinational freight logistics company that's next to me mum's in Finglas. And that was the start of an unbelievable journey. And why I say that is because I went into the job as a very entry-level admin clerk. And every time I looked at somebody in a better role, I was like, I could do that. I want that. I could do that. And I always kept trying to get it. I think there was looking back at it now as I reflect, I was never satisfied. I was always trying to fill that void. So I was always striving. I was always trying to get something better. And I was always hit with knockbacks. You haven't got a degree. You need a degree. You want to get anywhere in this company, you need a degree. So I went and got a degree. I graduated in Anglo Ruskin University in Cambridge with a BA in Business Leadership and Business Management. Would I say I was a top student? No. But I recognised that it was a gap that I needed to do in order to fulfil a career that I wanted to progress. I was at the failing at something that meant so much to me that I wasn't going to let things get in the way of me failing again. And that when I look back at it now, that came from a lot of things. It came from the growing up and without a father and all those things that contribute to that. It came from leaving home at a young age and then getting sent home when it didn't work out. So there was a lot of kind of contributing factors, but there was a kind of drive and a determination in me to say, if that's what I need to do, then I'm going to go and do it. So after that, and the truth be told, I didn't want to leave that company until they were trying to relocate me throughout Europe on various assignments, and I just wasn't feeling the relocation. So I found myself at 32 a managing director of a 26 million euro business that we were turning over. And it was, I spent 4.5 years in the role. It was an incredible journey. Was I qualified to do it? No. The first meeting I walked into a customer and a woman looked at me and went, oh, you're younger than what I thought you were going to be. And through it all, the biggest thing for me was that I deserved to be there. Anyone, if I believe myself and I back myself that I can do that. I had really good success in the role and moved on from that since to a bigger role. But I had a sense of belief. Helen kind of touched on Richard Branson later on. And I seen this quote when I was about 18, and I don't know why, but I carry it everywhere. In every presentation I give, I do it. If someone offers you an amazing opportunity and you're not sure you can do it, say yes, then learn how to do it. That's pretty much what I've built a life around. That's pretty much how I would say I'm going to continue in terms of how I do my professional career. I believe, and this is not cocky, this is not arrogant, that I could do pretty much any job, with the exception of some of the really skilled doctors and stuff, and But I mean, in terms of running business, I believe I could do any job. Would I do it well? That's the main. But I believe that there's something in me that if I don't know the skill, I'll learn the skill. And I definitely back myself to do it. So if I was to go back to when I was growing up, and I was gonna give myself any words of advice, or give anybody any words of advice, be humble, because life will humble you otherwise. And life does humble you. Life continues to humble. Be honest. People want honesty, but very few people tell the truth. And if you can be honest with yourself and be honest with people around you, well, then you can sleep at night knowing that you've got a clear conscience. Be you. Again, I was listening to Helen and she was saying that, like, nobody is better at being you than being you. Nobody. But above all and above anything else, back yourself. Because you will be surprised how far you can go and what you can achieve in life by belief and backing yourself. Thank you.